Hello everyone. Today I'd like to review the entirety of October as far as the 3-card blind main event tournament goes. Before we begin, I did want to address that my baby has been born, is healthy, my wife is happy and healthy, we're all doing great, and I wanted to thank the community, especially our game gurus and patrons, for being patient and supporting me during that time. We have a lot to cover today, so let's just jump right into it. Possibly the greatest event that impacted the meta during October was that Wasteland got unbanned. Wasteland was a highly anticipated card in this meta, so for that reason, many players found themselves playing around Wasteland or adopting it as part of their own strategy. For that reason, it should come as no surprise to anyone that Wasteland was the second most popular card this month, with an 11.20% meta share. Despite its popularity, the fact that many players played around Wasteland, knowing that it was going to be an influential card, resulted in it earning a modest 51% average score. Since we're on the subject of Wasteland and popular cards, I think it is important to discuss how people chose to play around Wasteland by looking at the most popular card this month, which was Mishra's Workshop, which had a 12.80% meta share and an average score of 56%. What is notable about Mishra's Workshop is that it is a mana source that can deploy a significant threat, or possibly multiple significant threats, in a single activation. This means that even if the opponent is on a Wasteland deck, you will be able to deploy all of your strategy without having to worry about Wasteland. Because Mishra's Workshop and Wasteland are both colorless mana sources that favor playing artifact-based threats, it should come as no surprise that many of the decks that we saw this month were amalgamations of cards like Chronomaton, Phyrexian Revoker, Lupine Prototype, the Rack, and Pithing Needle. Similarly, the third most popular card this month was Burning Inquiry, which had a meta share of 10.40% and an average score of 57%. The significance of Burning Inquiry is that between Mountain or Simian Spirit Guide, the deck is essentially immune to Wasteland and is extremely reliable at winning the game when it takes the first turn. Now that you have a general sense of what the landscape during October looked like, let's go into congratulating our winners, starting with Pod E, beginning with Mylan, who was playing Chancellor of the Forge, Dwarven Hold, and Fury. Despite relying on a storage land during a month where Wasteland was extremely popular, Myland performed extremely well because that 1/1 goblin that comes off of Chancellor of the Forge doesn't care whether or not Dwarven Hold gets destroyed. And similarly, you can exile Fury to do 4 damage divided as you choose among opponents, creatures, and or planeswalkers, so that gives Myland a really strong fighting chance even in matchups where Dwarven Hold isn't something that can be relied on. Tying Myland for first place in Group E was Scourge, who was playing Chancellor of the Forge, Foil, and Island, which is not a dissimilar list to Myland's in the sense that it relies on that 1/1 goblin that comes off of Chancellor of the Forge and can fall back on free to cast Disruption to make sure the opponent is unable to deploy their own strategy. Our winner for Group D was Walthrus, who was playing Lupine Prototype, Mishra's Workshop, and Pithing Needle, matching that style of deck I mentioned earlier, where a player can use Mishra's Workshop to deploy their entire game plan through Wasteland. I would like to take a minute here to highlight Pithing Needle and how well it performed in this pod. It turned off cards like Caracas, Chronomaton, Oko Thief of Crowns, Urza's Saga, and the list goes on and on. This turned out to be an excellent choice on Walthrus's part and a great meta call. Our winner for Group C was Andy, who was playing Gisa's Bidding, Kozilek Butcher of Truth, and Lion's Eye Diamond. Andy managed to achieve the highest average score out of any player in the month of October with an average score of 88%. This interestingly places Kozilek Butcher of Truth as this month's highest average score card, despite the fact it never gets cast. Andy's deck uses Lion's Eye Diamond to discard and pay for Geese's Bidding's Madness cost, and discard Kozilek Butcher of Truth to trigger its reshuffle effect, which allows Andy to produce those 2/2 zombies every 3 turns by shuffling the cards back into their deck and drawing them one by one. Our winner for Group B was Amethyst They/Them, who was also playing the Chancellor of the Forge foil island deck. Since we're on the subject, I think I should give an honorable mention to Yum36, who came in 3rd place in Group A with the Chancellor of the Forge foil island deck. So this deck performed extremely well across multiple pods this month. Finally, in Group A, we have a tie between our winners, Mirror Metal and Subnova42, who were both playing Lupine Prototype, Mishra's Workshop, and the Rack. I'd like to take a minute here just to highlight how incredible it is that both Subnova and Mirror Metal, who have been consistently top performers in this tournament — Subnova is our current champion and Mirror Metal was our former champion — both managed to continue to perform extremely well, but also submitted the same exact deck lists. The reason I'd like to highlight this is because often, new players who are exposed to the 3-card blind format make the mistake of assuming that this format is just glorified rock, paper, scissors. And to give them some credit, there is some truth to that, but I think the fact that both Mirror Metal and Subnova have been consistently coming in first in our high elo pod and also managed to come up with the exact same winning deck list indicates that there is an underlying skill in choosing the best deck that can only be achieved with great attention to detail and knowledge of the format. To be completely honest, at this point I am almost baffled by Mirror Metal and Subnova's ability to continue to perform well, and every single month I'm always eagerly looking forward to seeing what they've come up with. Alright, now that we've covered what the meta looked like as well as congratulated our winners, I want to go into discussing the outcomes of the ban vote that will affect the format for November. As a reminder, every member of the community voted on these 5 cards and could assign each card a value of +2 through -2 to indicate how much they wanted the card banned or not banned, where a negative number meant that they wanted the card banned and a positive number meant they wanted the card to remain legal in the format. Rather than leaving you all hanging, I'm just going to go ahead and say that all 5 of the cards that were voted on this month have been banned for November. Let's begin by talking about Burning Inquiry, which had an average vote of -1.25. The majority of the community did want to see Burning Inquiry go away. The card is very frustrating if it is popular in the meta because there isn't really that much meaningful counterplay when the card takes the first turn of the game. Burning Inquiry was a popular write-in previous months, and this month finally solidified its need for a ban because it became far more popular than it ever has been before. Next on the list we have Lion's Eye Diamond. As you can see, Lion's Eye Diamond wasn't nearly as strongly hated as Burning Inquiry. However, Lion's Eye Diamond was again a popular write-in during September, so I wanted to respect members of the community that wanted to see the card voted on by including it in this vote, and as you can see, it had an average vote of -0.28, which means it has been added to the ban list. Oko Thief of Crowns has also been a historically consistent performer when combined with Interplanar Beacon and Mana Crypt. This month in particular may have revealed just how resilient the Oko strategy is. There were lots of copies of Pithing Needle and Phyrexian Revoker running around, and in spite of that, the Oko Interplanar Beacon Mana Crypt deck managed to achieve a lofty 60% average score. Banning Oko will hopefully open up room for other decks to flourish in the format. Our next card is the Rack, which is an interesting one to add to this discussion. The Rack is undeniably an extremely powerful card in the 3-card blind format because it pumps out a lot of damage, and the condition of getting your opponent below 3 cards in their hand is astonishingly easy to achieve in a format where players only begin with 3 cards in their hand. I believe the rack has flown under a lot of people's radars for a long time now because its win rate has been masked by the fact that many players, intentionally or not intentionally, have submitted decks that use the rack but cannot actually win the game. If you are using a deck that runs the rack that cannot force your opponent to discard cards or play cards to address a different threat in your deck can only tie at best. Now that we got to see the rack featured in a first place winning deck in our high elo group, both by Mirror Metal and Subnova, I think it's clear how powerful the card is, and its introduction to the ban list will hopefully encourage players to look into other threats that are maybe less reliable or less safe than the rack. Our final card moving to the ban list this month is Wasteland, which is a repeat offender. You can see here that a large number of players really dislike Wasteland, and frankly I dislike it too. I think it homogenizes the format by preventing players from running more exciting mana sources. I think the storage lands are really interesting, but there were a decent number of players that were holdouts on Wasteland. You can see that several people voted for +1, that they would probably prefer that it doesn't get banned, but their opinions were overwhelmed by the majority of people that preferred that it is definitely banned. So this marks the first month where every card that was voted on got added to the ban list. We're not done yet, however. There were cards that the patrons voted on to determine whether they were unbanned, and those cards were Black Lotus, Blackmail, Balance, and Death's Shadow. Of these 4 cards, the only one that received an unban is Balance, so Balance will be legal to play again in November, and I'm curious to see how that plays out because the primary use for Balance was to use Black Lotus to force your opponent to discard their entire hand, so I'm curious to see how and if players will leverage Balance in the absence of Black Lotus. So that wraps up the month of October. Thank you again everyone for being patient as I adjust to the major life changes that have come with having a newborn child. Your patience and support has been greatly appreciated. With that, I'd like to wrap up the video by reminding everyone that the tournament for November will begin on November 1st, and you will have 1 week to submit your deck lists through the website on the Participate tab. I'm really excited to see what everybody comes up with for November. Thanks for watching everyone, and see you soon.